Good morning, students. Today we shall deal with the topic called the internationalization of the Indian rupee or the globalization of the Indian rupee. Right? Now this topic gains a lot of significance or has become very important in the context of the global events which are taking place. For example, India, yes, trade with Russia in energy, right? Avoiding the dollar as a medium of transaction and using the domestic currency for transactions, and the rupee now becoming a global currency just like your other hard currencies in the world, like your dollar, pound, yen, Japanese yen, Chinese yuan, right, or renminbi. Just like your hard currencies, the global reserve currencies, rupee would also be the next global currency or the global reserve currency. Rupee will be, right, a global currency, or it's called internationalization of the rupee, where rupee will be used for global trade transactions, just like how your dollar is now being used for global transactions, imports, exports, maintenance of foreign exchange reserves. Tomorrow you will also find the rupee to be used as the currency where global transactions would take place. As on today, students, more than 80% of the global transactions in trade, let's say imports and exports, takes place in the form of dollars. So tomorrow, let's say rupee, once it becomes a global currency, right, the Indian rupee would be used for global transactions in trade, imports and exports. Yeah, we'll move to the next slide, students. Yeah. Now, why is this in the news? Right, I've told you internationalization or globalization of the rupee has gained a lot of significance in the recent context. Right? Yeah. Now, sensing this, the Reserve Bank of India has constituted an interdepartmental group, right, which is headed by the RBI's Deputy Governor, Mr. B. Ravishankar, right, to work on the nuances or dynamics of the globalization or internationalization of the Indian rupee. That is, yeah, the group will work on, right, what is the current global currency system, global currency reserve system, right, what are the important hard currencies in the world, right, how would rupee be converted into a hard currency, right, what are the advantages and disadvantages, yeah, is the Indian rupee, right, capable of being a global currency, right. Now all these issues would be thoroughly studied by the RBI's interdepartmental group, right. It's written whether the rupee has the potential to become an international currency or a global currency, right. The RBI has got one governor and 4 deputy governors, and one of the deputy governors, Mr. B. Ravishankar, will be heading this interdepartmental group to study on the topic internationalization or globalization of the Indian rupee, whether it really has the potential to become a global currency or not. Yes. Now, students, if you define, let us first define what do you mean by globalization or internationalization of the rupee, right? Yeah, internationalization of the rupee is a process that involves, right, increasing, internationalization of the rupee, right, is a process that involves increasing use of the local currency in cross-border transactions, right. Now, when you talk about India's local currency or India's domestic currency, it is the rupee. Now, like what I've told you, as in today, close to 80% of the global transactions or cross-border transactions in terms of trade, right, settlement of trade, right, takes place in the form of dollars. Now, if rupee becomes your global currency, right, many of the or volume of the global transactions will now be conducted in rupee terms, or increasing use of the local currency called the rupee in cross-border transactions, right. So, internationalization or globalization explains the use of the local currency, that is a dollar, in cross-border transactions or global transactions. Global transactions could be in the form of trade, imports and exports, could be in the form of holding foreign exchange reserves, right, could be in the form of, right, remittances or payments, right. Okay. Then it involves promoting the use of the rupee for imports and export trade, yeah, and other current account transactions, followed by its use in capital account transactions. Yeah, students, what does this explain? This explains that the rupee would be used in the BOP transactions or the balance of payments transactions. What is balance of payments? Yeah. BOP, balance of payments, is an account of the country which has got a credit side and which has got a debit side. Credit is what comes into the country in the form of dollars, and debit is what goes out from the country in the form of dollars. So balance of payments is a systematic account of a nation's right, yeah, inflows and outflows, what comes into the country and what goes out of the country. Suppose the inflows are more than the outflows, then your balance of payments account becomes stable. If your outflow is more than the inflow, that is the dollars going out of the country is more than the dollars coming into the country, because dollar is now the global reserve currency, then your balance of payments account becomes unstable. Balance on payments account, students, contains two accounts. One is your current account and second is your capital account, right? So if your rupee becomes an international currency, the transactions in your current account or trade account and transactions in your capital account, that is capital inflow and outflow, will take place in local currency, that is the rupee. Till now it has been taking place in the form of dollars, right? So if your rupee becomes a global currency, the transactions in the current account and in the capital account will be conducted in the form of, or will be conducted in rupee terms, which till now was being conducted in dollar terms. Next, students, it involves promoting the rupee for import and export trade and other current account transactions, followed by its use in capital account transactions. And moving to the next slide. Now, what are the various recommendations which have been given by the Reserve Bank of India's interdepartmental group, right? Since internationalization or globalization of the local currency, say the rupee, right, is a big process, right? It's a lengthy process, right, which cannot be achieved, let's say, in a span of 1 or 2 months. It takes a long period of time for the Indian rupee to become a global currency. So in that process, lengthy process, right, we need to take short-term measures, medium-term measures and long-term measures to ensure the internationalization or the globalization of the Indian rupee. Short-term measures could be, let's say 1 to 3 years, medium-term measures 3 to 5 years and long-term measures more than 5 years. Like I've already mentioned, globalization or internationalization of the Indian rupee, yes, rupee is a lengthy process, right? It takes a long period of time. So you need a mix of short-term, medium-term and long-term measures to achieve the globalization or the internationalization of the Indian rupee, right? Now let us briefly look at the various measures being taken, right? One, long-term measures, right? Now what is this, students? Inclusion of the rupee in the special drawing rights of the IMF. SDR is an international reserve asset created by the IMF to supplement the official reserves of its member countries, right? Now, special drawing rights. What is special drawing rights? Special drawing rights is the account which is maintained by the IMF, right? And special drawing rights also becomes part of what is called the foreign exchange reserves of a country. For example, foreign exchange reserves of India is a combination of foreign currency assets, gold reserves, reserve transaction plan and special drawing rights. So special drawing rights or SDR is the lending or accounting units of the IMF, right? And special drawing rights, right, is stored in the form of global currencies, the hard currencies. Now if you talk about the SDR basket of currencies, we have now the dollar, right, the Japanese yen, the British pound and the euro. So these 4 currencies. Now your Chinese yuan or renminbi has been added to the list of the SDR basket of currencies. And since they are part of the SDR basket of currencies, they are recognized as global currencies. And if India of the Indian rupee becomes part of the special drawing rights of the IMF, the Indian rupee also gets recognized as a global currency or an international currency. Yes, students? Right. Next. And yes, SDR I told you is part of the foreign exchange reserves maintained by a country, right? For example, in India, foreign exchange reserves is about $600 billion, right? $640 billion, the latest, right? So, foreign exchange reserves is a combination of your foreign currency assets, gold reserves, special drawing rights, and the reserve transaction plan, right? RTP. Recalibration of the foreign portfolio investor regime to accelerate the pace of internationalization of the rupee, right? So, foreign portfolio investment. So, this is what is foreign portfolio investment. This is a basket of investment, right, or a pool of investments maintained by foreign portfolio investors. Now, if rupee becomes part of the foreign portfolio investment, it also explains that the rupee is now a global currency, or rupee becoming part of the foreign portfolio investment, yes, signals the globalization or the internationalization of the Indian rupee. Then we said the RBI should also look at expanding the footprint of the rupee denominated payment mechanism, right? Now what is this, students? Usually, now what happens, right? All the payments, whether for imports or what you earn through exports, is denominated in dollar terms, right? Now, if the same payments that you make, let's say I buy 500 barrels of crude oil from Russia, I pay them $1,000. Instead of that, if the payment is made in the form of rupees, that becomes rupee denominated payment mechanism. Then it can be for trade, it can be for capital transactions, right? For different transactions. If the payment, when the payment is made in the form of rupees, it explains rupee denominated payment mechanism. But as on today, the dollar denominated payment mechanism is dominant, right? So globalization or internationalization of the rupee signals rupee denominated payment mechanism. Or we can put it like this: if the rupee denominated payment mechanism gets institutionalized, that signals the globalization or the internationalization of the Indian rupee. The Indian rupee being recognized as a global currency, right? RBI should step up measures for the inclusion of Indian government bonds in the global bond indices. Government bond is a financial instrument launched by the government which has got a principal component and an interest component. It is basically a financial instrument or a financial market instrument which enables the government to raise funds. Now, if internationalization or globalization of the Indian rupee explains Indian government bonds becoming part of the global bond indices or the Indian financial markets or Indian financial market instruments getting integrated into the global financial markets. So your Indian government bonds will now become a global financial instrument. That's called part of the global bond indices, right? Then rationalization of the, which I explained, FPA, foreign portfolio investment regime, right? And then non-residents should be allowed to open a rupee account, right? The people who have gone abroad, right, and they send a lot of money, right, remittances, right? So the non-residents should also be made to open a rupee account. All this explains, right, the internationalization or globalization of the Indian rupee. The rupee now becoming a global currency. Then medium-term measures, review of the withholding tax for masala bonds issuances, right? Withholding tax is the tax which is levied on investments, right? Expansion of the RTGS system for settling international transactions, right? Your rapid system, right? Rapid gross settlement system, right? Inclusion of the rupee in the continuous linked settlement system, right? So rupee becoming part of, right, the global transactions, right? Short-term measures, higher usage of the rupee in invoicing and settlement of international trade, as well as in capital account transactions, right, which I have told you, your balance of payments, current account and capital account transactions, right. Use of the existing bilateral and multilateral payment and settlement mechanisms such as ACU, Asian Clearing Union, right. This is as far as your regional system is concerned, the Asian Clearing Union, right. India becoming part of the ACU mechanism. Then advantages of, now what are the advantages, right? Suppose the rupee becomes an international currency or rupee becomes a global currency, what are the advantages to the Indian economy? Since in the last 30 years of economic reforms, right, the Indian economy has opened up. We are now an open economy and we are an emerging market economy. And with India's trade volume increasing, right, and India having the capacity to attract almost $80 billion of foreign direct investment on an annual basis, right, in the last 2 to 3 years, right, we definitely need to study the advantages of the globalization or internationalization of the Indian rupee. For example, right, the use of the rupee in cross-border transactions, like what I've explained to you, trade, imports and exports, remittances, that is payments, right. Then in terms of investments, then enables better growth of the business. Since now the business will have more capital or investment available with them, they'll be able to expand their business and explore new markets. So that will automatically strengthen their business. Then, it reduces the need for holding forex reserves, like what I've told you. Because now, foreign currency assets, if you take, which is one of the 4 constants of foreign exchange reserves, the major part of the foreign currency account or foreign currency reserves is maintained in the form of dollars. Now, if rupee becomes an international currency, right, the dominance of the dollar will come down. So, the holding of the foreign exchange reserves, the need to hold foreign exchange reserves, right, to meet your import and export, so let's say to meet your imports, right, the need for that comes down, since your dependence on the dollar will come down, because now we are an import dependent economy, students, right, we need to pay a lot of dollars when we import, right. So once you start paying in rupees and the usage of dollar comes down, so the need to hold foreign exchange reserves to a large extent, $650 billion also gets reduced, which is very important. Then naturally you will reduce your dependence on foreign currency, since now your rupee is a global currency, your rupee becomes a hard currency, right. Then the bargaining power of the Indian business will also increase, since you can attract more investments, right, since now you will use the rupee as the medium of exchange for trade, right, the bargaining power of the Indian business will improve, reduces the transaction cost, and India as an economy becomes more competitive, right. The reason, right, the more you depend on the dollar, the more you are vulnerable to global uncertainties such as global commodity inflation, etc. So you reduce your dependence on the dollar, right, you will become more competitive as an economy, that is your exposure to uncertainty will also come down, you will become stronger and less vulnerable as an economy. So you become more competent as an economy. Then change challenges. Naturally, it's such a big process, it's a huge exercise, right. So you'll have advantages as well as a lot of challenges. Now what are the challenges, right? We basically are a capital deficit economy, right? We need investments into our country to build our infrastructure, to meet our developmental needs and priorities. So since we are an investment deficit economy, suppose if the rupee becomes a global currency, and if the rupee is also subjected to volatility, what will be the outcome? That has to be studied. Reduce reserve accretion, that's dealing with your foreign exchange reserves, right. Challenges in terms of regulatory compliance, right. Now, Reserve Bank of India, yes, maintains foreign exchange reserves. Reserve Bank of India deals with exchange rate management. Now, with rupee becoming a global currency, what kind of changes in regulation has to be brought about? What are the changes which are to be introduced by the Reserve Bank of India? And Reserve Bank of India has to work in coordination with organizations such as IMF and the central banks of other nations. And within India also, what kind of regulatory changes have to be introduced, right? Then, as on today, dollar being the global reserve currency, you find a lot of dollar liquidity or dollar availability. Now, let's say if you reduce the dependence on the dollar and currencies like the rupee start becoming global currencies, right? The liquidity available in the global market, yes, is questionable. And it is this liquidity which actually drives the capital markets. Then naturally, with the change in the global reserve currency or global currency reserve system, the global financial system will also be subjected to further changes, right. Then naturally, right, your increasing volatility and uncertainty, the global financial system, will be subjected to, right, volatility. This is in the short term. Since the economy is being subjected to changes, for the system to get readjusted takes time. The same is the case with your globalization of the Indian rupee, right. The financial system will be subjected to short-term fluctuations, right, short-term uncertainties, but over a period of time, it will get adjusted. And the way forward, yes, right, the foreign exchange market in India, forex market in the sense, right, where there is buying and selling of currency or buying and selling of your dollars, right, buying and selling of foreign exchange resources, with the dominant currency being the dollar, right. So we need a stronger and a well-regulated foreign exchange market. In this context, the role of the Reserve Bank of India in coordination with the Ministry of Finance becomes very, very significant, and we are also moving in that direction, right. Next, liberalized settlements, right, liberalized settlements in rupee, LRS, right, liberalized rupee settlement system, that's what they call it, right, technically called as the LRS system, liberalized settlement, rupee settlement system, right. Liberalized is make the system more flexible. The more you try to restrict, the more is the scope for discrepancies and anomalies, right. So you liberalize the system, that will automatically make the system more open and competent, right. And then interregulatory coordination, very important, right. I have told you, regulation between, you have got different regulators. For example, in India you have SEBI, Securities Exchange Board of India, Reserve Bank of India, then you have the Pension Fund Regulatory Development Authority, right, you have got different regulators in the financial sector, So globalization, or you want to make an attempt or effort for globalizing the Indian rupee, there has to be coordination of the regulatory authorities within India, Reserve Bank of India, SEBI, PFRDA, and also coordination with the central banks of other nations, and coordination with the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, on a global basis. So positioning India as a more attractive destination for foreign investment. Yes, now your rupee is a global currency, right? Now since your rupee is now become a global currency or the global reserve currency, right? Naturally you will also become more open as an economy, right? And you will become stronger as an economy. And once you are a stronger economy and you are macroeconomically more resilient, you will also be able to attract investments. So end of the day, being an investment deficit nation, we need to attract investments. And at the same time, to reduce our uncertainty against global risk, you also need to reduce your dependence on the dollar. That is where your globalization or internationalization of the Indian rupee becomes significant. Thank you, students, for the patient hearing.